Gemini is often painted as lightness, as wind, as quick laughter and quick exits, as a mind that skips across the surface of life like sunlight on water. From the outside, it looks effortless. Conversations collected like souvenirs, ideas traded like currency, experiences stacked like bright postcards. People assume nothing can weigh Gemini down for long because Gemini seems to keep moving, always finding a new angle, a new thought, a new door to open. But that surface is not emptiness. It is motion layered over depth. Gemini is not shallow. Gemini is multi-storied. Inside is a mind that rarely sleeps, a restless cathedral of connections where one thought leans into another, where ideas braid into emotion, where emotion dissolves into memory, where memory becomes a future that has not happened yet. This is why Gemini can feel so hard to hold, not because they lack feeling, but because their feeling has a language, and that language is the mind. When Gemini loves, it is never only a heart thing, it is a mind and heart thing, fused like two flames feeding the same air. Gemini does not fall in love with possession. Gemini does not dream of building emotional walls and calling them safety. Gemini dreams of movement inside love, dialogue inside commitment, expansion inside closeness. Gemini wants to feel mentally alive with someone, like the connection is an open sky instead of a closed room. So the accusation arrives, again and again. Inconsistent, unavailable, hard to read, hard to trust. But the truth is more precise. Gemini does not fear commitment. Gemini fears stagnation. Gemini fears waking up and realizing the relationship has stopped teaching anything, that the conversations have become recycled sentences, that curiosity has been replaced by routine. For Gemini, heartbreak is not the only ending. Boredom can be an ending too, a quiet spiritual exhaustion that feels like the soul is starving while everything looks fine on paper. In the beginning, Gemini is presence with spark. They listen the way a lantern listens to the dark, lighting corners others never notice. They ask questions others never think to ask, not to interrogate, but to understand. They pick up on tiny shifts, the micro pauses, the hidden meanings behind jokes, the small tenderness you did not think anyone saw. They adapt to the rhythm of the other person like a dancer matching a song, playful and attentive, curious and warm. Gemini makes their partner feel interesting, alive, seen, because Gemini is genuinely engaged. Then time does what time always does. The relationship gains weight. Expectations harden. Emotions become demands instead of invitations. The connection starts to feel mentally restrictive, like love is being measured, monitored, controlled. And Gemini begins to withdraw, not dramatically, not loudly, not with a slammed door. Gemini withdraws silently. They speak a little less. They observe a little more. They live a little higher in their head. Not because they want to leave, but because the relationship has begun to feel like it is asking them to become smaller. This is where misunderstandings are born. Many partners interpret Gemini's quietness as a lack of love. They respond with pressure, pressure to explain, pressure to reassure, pressure to be certain on demand, pressure to make feelings perform on schedule. And pressure is the fastest way to lose a Gemini, because pressure feels like control, and control feels like suffocation. Gemini does not need space to escape love. Gemini needs space to remain inside love without disappearing inside someone else's expectations. When Gemini feels free, they stay. When Gemini feels trapped, they vanish. Sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally, sometimes in the subtle way of being present in the room, but absent in the spirit. That is why Gemini's ideal partner is not someone addicted to certainty. It is someone mature enough to understand that uncertainty can be part of growth. Someone emotionally intelligent enough to recognize that Gemini's silence is often processing, not rejection. that Gemini's curiosity is engagement with life, not disloyalty, that Gemini's evolution is learning in motion, not instability. Compatibility for Gemini is not about intensity for the sake of intensity. It is about alignment. Certain signs align naturally with Gemini's way of loving, not because of shallow cliches, but because the emotional dynamics fit the architecture of Gemini's heart. Libra is one of the most harmonious matches for Gemini, especially when both have grown beyond ego and insecurity. Libra understands balance at a deep level. Libra values dialogue, emotional fairness, and mutual respect. With Libra, Gemini can breathe. Conversation flows without effort. Ideas move back and forth without competition. Libra does not rush Gemini into emotional conclusions, and Libra does not demand immediate certainty as proof of love. Libra creates an atmosphere where Gemini feels safe to explore thoughts out loud, safe to be complicated, safe to be evolving. This matters because Gemini often spends years feeling misunderstood. With Libra, the understanding feels natural instead of forced. Gemini feels seen without being dissected. Libra brings emotional calm to Gemini's mental movement, softening the restlessness without slowing the spirit down. And yet, this relationship requires awareness. Libra must avoid losing themselves just to keep peace. Gemini must avoid staying on the surface just to avoid vulnerability. When both choose growth, Libra becomes the partner who grounds Gemini without restricting them, offering harmony instead of control, stability instead of stagnation. Aquarius connects with Gemini in a different way, like two constellations recognizing each other across a clear night. This bond often begins with recognition rather than fireworks. Two minds sensing familiarity. Two people realizing they see the world from a similar altitude. With Aquarius, Gemini feels free to be unconventional, to question norms, to speak thoughts others label strange. There is less emotional pressure here, less expectation to perform intimacy in a traditional way. Aquarius understands distance. Aquarius respects individuality, and that creates a deep sense of psychological safety for Gemini. Together, Gemini and Aquarius can talk for hours about society, the future, human behavior, philosophy, the hidden patterns in people, and the bigger meaning behind small moments. But there is a hidden risk. When neither partner initiates vulnerability, intimacy can remain intellectual, a strong connection with little grounding. When Aquarius dares to open emotionally and Gemini commits to presence, this bond becomes powerful, built on trust, freedom, and loyalty without possession. Aries brings something Gemini often lacks: immediacy. Where Gemini thinks, Aries acts. Where Gemini analyzes, Aries moves. This connection is energetic from the beginning, full of momentum. Aries pulls Gemini into the present moment. Gemini pulls Aries into reflection. When balanced, this pairing is transformative, like fire and air learning how to create warmth instead of chaos. When immature, it becomes turbulent. Aries can feel insecure about Gemini's curiosity. Gemini can feel overwhelmed by Aries' intensity. But when both understand each other, Aries becomes the spark that keeps Gemini engaged with life, and Gemini becomes the voice that helps Aries grow emotionally, turning impulse into insight. Leo offers Gemini emotional visibility. Leo loves openly, expressively, without shame. With Leo, Gemini can feel seen not just for the mind, but for the heart. Leo admires Gemini's intelligence and versatility. Gemini admires Leo's confidence and warmth. Still, ego must be managed. Leo must avoid turning love into constant validation. Gemini must avoid retreating into emotional distance when feelings get real. When maturity leads the connection, this relationship becomes deeply fulfilling, one partner inspiring, the other anchoring, both learning how to be brave in different languages. Sagittarius, Gemini's opposite sign, represents growth through contrast. Both value freedom, movement, and truth. Neither thrives in emotional confinement. Together they explore life continuously, feeding each other's appetite for expansion. But grounding is essential. Without emotional presence, this connection can become restless, a series of shared adventures without depth. When Sagittarius stays present and Gemini stays consistent, this becomes a partnership based on expansion rather than escape, a bond that evolves instead of running. Now the truth most people ignore becomes clear. Gemini does not struggle with commitment. Gemini struggles with misalignment. Gemini commits deeply when the mind is engaged, the freedom is respected, and the evolution is supported. The wrong partner tries to define Gemini. The right partner explores Gemini. The wrong partner demands certainty as a constant tribute. The right partner understands change as a natural rhythm. Gemini's duality is not confusion, it is adaptability. Gemini changes because Gemini learns. Gemini evolves because Gemini observes. When someone tries to freeze Gemini into one version of themselves, the relationship begins to decay from the inside. This is why Gemini can leave relationships that look perfect from the outside. Inside, Gemini can feel mentally alone, like a bright mind trapped in a quiet room. Gemini cannot survive long in emotional cages, even gilded ones. Many people never realize this. Gemini often leaves not when love is gone, but when love starts to feel smaller than who Gemini is becoming. Gemini is constantly evolving internally, even when nothing looks different on the surface. When a relationship does not evolve alongside that inner movement, a silent gap forms. At first, Gemini tries to adapt. Gemini explains. Gemini softens needs. Gemini compromises. Gemini becomes gentler than necessary, quieter than true, simpler than honest, because Gemini does not want to hurt anyone. But over time, something inside begins to resist, because Gemini's soul needs expansion the way other souls need security. And when Gemini feels the mind is no longer welcome, detachment can appear as self-protection. This is one of the most misunderstood patterns in Gemini love. Gemini does not detach because Gemini does not care. Gemini detaches because Gemini cares too much to lose the self completely. Many Geminis grow up hearing that their thoughts are too fast, too scattered, too much. They learn to filter themselves, to shrink their inner world so others can feel comfortable. But self-suppression becomes exhausting. A mind built for flight cannot live forever in a small cage. So the lesson becomes unavoidable. The ideal partner for Gemini never forces a choice between love and authenticity. The ideal partner understands that Gemini's curiosity is not a threat, but a gift. When Gemini feels accepted intellectually, emotional intimacy follows naturally. Gemini opens slowly but deeply. Gemini does not rush emotional exposure. Gemini needs trust that vulnerability will not be used later as a leash. This is why emotional intelligence matters more to Gemini than grand romantic gestures. Gemini is not impressed by intensity alone. Gemini is impressed by understanding. Gemini is impressed by someone who can hold complexity without turning it into suspicion, someone who can listen without trying to control the conclusion. If this message is resonating, place your date of birth and your zodiac sign in the comments, written like a quiet signature to the universe, a small claim of self-knowledge that helps the energy meet you more clearly. And subscribe to Astro Gemini near this moment in the journey, because this channel is built for minds that feel deeply, for hearts that think, for souls that keep evolving and want language for what they experience. Now go deeper into the emotional pattern Gemini repeats in love. Gemini often falls in love with potential, not from naivety, but from perception. Gemini sees what could be, not only what is. Gemini senses growth in people. Gemini imagines evolution. Gemini connects dots others never notice. This is beautiful, and it can also be dangerous, because Gemini can stay too long in connections that stimulate the mind while neglecting the heart. Gemini can confuse conversation with intimacy, ideas with emotional presence. Gemini can mistake mental chemistry for true safety. When reality does not match the imagined potential, disappointment rises like a quiet storm. This is when Gemini's restlessness increases. Gemini begins to compare. Gemini begins to imagine alternatives, not from disloyalty, but from the mind searching for alignment, searching for a place where the inner world can breathe. The ideal partner grounds Gemini's imagination without crushing it. They do not shame Gemini for thinking ahead. They help bring ideas into reality. They offer structure without rigidity. They offer depth without heaviness. They offer consistency without pressure. When Gemini feels that balance, something softens. The search calms, the nervous system relaxes, the mind stops scanning for exits. This is especially true in Gemini's dynamic with Sagittarius, because Sagittarius understands Gemini's hunger for expansion and does not feel threatened by it. Where Gemini explores mentally, Sagittarius explores physically and philosophically. Together, they inspire each other. But they must learn stillness. Without emotional grounding, they risk becoming two beautiful winds that never become a home. When Sagittarius stays emotionally present and Gemini stays mentally committed, the connection becomes a partnership built on evolution, not comfort, and it lasts because it grows. Return to Gemini and Libra, because this pairing reveals something crucial about Gemini's emotional needs. Libra teaches Gemini how to sit with emotions instead of analyzing them away. Libra feels before reacting. Gemini thinks before feeling. Together, they can balance each other, but only if both show courage. Courage to speak uncomfortable truths. Courage to stay present when emotions get complex. When that happens, Gemini experiences something rare: emotional peace without boredom, stability without suffocation, tenderness without control. Aquarius, on the other hand, challenges Gemini to detach from emotional conditioning entirely. With Aquarius, Gemini learns that love does not have to be dramatic to be real, that loyalty does not require possession, that intimacy does not require constant closeness. But Aquarius can also mirror Gemini's emotional avoidance. When both remain in the mind, the heart can be left unattended. The best version of this relationship requires emotional risk. Aquarius must dare to feel. Gemini must dare to stay. When they do, the bond becomes unbreakable because it is chosen freely, not enforced through fear. Aries pushes Gemini into action. This relationship teaches Gemini courage, spontaneity, presence. It also teaches boundaries. Aries wants clarity. Gemini wants openness. Conflict appears when Aries demands answers Gemini has not processed yet. The solution is patience and honest communication. When Aries learns to wait and Gemini learns to speak truth without disappearing, the relationship becomes electric and grounding at the same time. Leo brings warmth into Gemini's world. Leo reminds Gemini that emotions do not have to be analyzed to be valid, that expression can be simple and human. Leo also wants consistency, and Gemini learns that emotional presence is a form of commitment, not a prison. When Gemini stays present and Leo stays humble, the bond becomes nourishing, a place where both the mind and heart can be celebrated. Now comes the most important truth about Gemini compatibility. No sign can fully satisfy Gemini if Gemini has not learned to understand the self. Many relationship struggles do not come only from others. They come from internal conflict. Gemini often fears stillness, not from shallowness, but because stillness makes hidden feelings rise, uncertainty, doubt, longing, grief, tenderness that feels too exposed. When the mind stops moving, the heart gets louder. And instead of facing those feelings, Gemini can reach for stimulation, new conversations, new ideas, new possibilities, a quick breeze to avoid a deep ocean. The right partner does not compete with Gemini's mind. The right partner helps Gemini feel safe enough to slow it down, because Gemini does not need more stimulation. Gemini needs presence. This is the paradox of Gemini love, craving movement but healing in stillness, seeking freedom but blooming in trust, analyzing emotions but transforming through feeling them. If you have felt seen by these words, take a moment in the middle of this message and press like, not as a habit, but as a signal to your own spirit that self-understanding matters. That small action helps Astro Gemini reach the people who need language for what they feel. When Gemini finally finds the balance, something remarkable happens. Gemini stops searching. Gemini stops imagining better alternatives. Gemini chooses the present moment because for the first time, the relationship feels as expansive as the inner world. That is the real commitment Gemini offers. Not chained loyalty, but chosen loyalty, not forced closeness, but freely given presence. When Gemini feels understood, Gemini becomes one of the most loyal, inspiring, mentally intimate partners anyone can have. For those loving a Gemini, the lesson is simple and strong. Gemini does not need to be chased. Gemini does not need to be controlled. Gemini does not need to be fixed. Gemini needs to be understood. Gemini needs space to think, freedom to evolve, and safety to feel. Offer that, and Gemini does not disappear. Gemini stays. Gemini commits. Gemini grows beside you. And for the Gemini soul listening, the path is self-honesty. Growth does not always look like movement. Sometimes it looks like staying, like learning to breathe inside stillness, like learning that depth is not a trap when it is paired with respect. When Gemini learns to welcome stillness as a home instead of a threat, love stops feeling like a limitation and starts feeling like expansion with roots. If this script moved something inside you, keep building that connection with Astro Gemini. Subscribe now if you have not yet, and stay close to the messages that help you understand your nature without shame. Place your date of birth and your zodiac sign in the comments as a quiet affirmation of who you are and where you are in your evolution. Then carry this truth into your life. The right love does not shrink you, it meets you. Tap like again before you go. And subscribe to Astro Gemini at the end of this journey, because the more you understand how you love, the more you choose relationships that expand you instead of trapping you. If you want to hear everything the universe has to say to you, watch these other videos on our channel.